The custom data layer values feature in the user source listener allows us to write rules that can then push values into our data layer based on activity that we see elsewhere in the data layer. Once this is turned on, a new screen will appear called custom values. But the first step is to always ensure that the variables you want to use in your data layer are defined. We're going to go ahead and clear out a few of our variables, assuming that they're not being used, so that we can make some space for a new variable. So we're going to create a new variable called user medium. We're going to save that change. And then we're going to jump down to custom values under user source. And this is just one example of how we can use this listener. The sky is really the limit. As far as your brain can think, you can probably write rules to push information into the data layer. In this case, every time user source information is identified, we're going to actually group that together into what we would call the medium information. So we're going to actually jump in and build a lookup rule. And we're going to base this rule on the actual user source. Let's see if we can find, I think we're going to look for a .user source. It'll be easier to find. And here it is, source automatic values. So if you're not familiar with this, watch the writing rules overview video that appears on this custom values screen. There'll be a big button there soon that has a video. And you can watch that to learn more about how these rules operate and work. And what we're going to do is we're going to define the medium. Now, I'm going to fill this in, and then we'll circle back, and this will make more sense when you understand how the user source is working. So I'm going to put a value in here. We're going to save it. And what I would recommend is that you watch the video, which will soon be posted here under this capture user source. There'll be a button here by the time you're watching this. And watch that because it'll set up an example. You'll understand how user source is working. But at a high level, and just to kind of shortcut it, the user source is pushed into the data layer, and it might look something like this. Source is Google Ads. When a user comes to the website with certain parameters or values or from a certain referrer, the rules that drive those user source pieces of user source information are here under user source rules. And if we edit our query string rules, we'll see that we have a bunch of these that are Google. And all of these have the word Google Ads. But notice that we define a user source, but not necessarily a user medium. Now, in most of the scenarios that I work in, we don't necessarily need the medium because we can basically infer a medium in the future based on a user source. In this case, we're going to use that in real time to infer a medium as the data layer activity occurs. So we're going to write rules for Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, and Facebook Ads. Now, even though we have disparate user sources, meaning 5 different users from Google Ads can have 5 different user sources, we could have a single medium for those, like paid search. So maybe we want some of these to be paid search, maybe we want others of them to not be paid search. It depends on the model that you want to create. So understand that I'm just walking through one simple example of how this could work, but you could model your own example based on exactly how you want to define this. So in this case, let's simply take all of these Google sources and identify the medium as Google. Of course, you could also say take all these display sources and identify the medium as display or remarketing as remarketing. But to keep this simple, we'll focus on Google. And then we'll also do it for Microsoft Ads and Facebook Ads. So we're going to jump back here and we're going to identify We're going to add a few rows. So what's going to happen now is anytime our user source contains Google Ads, we're going to return the value Google. And anytime it contains Microsoft Ads, we'll return the value Microsoft. And so even though there was, maybe 5 or 6 different Google Ads variations in that table, our user medium is always going to be the same. So we're going to go ahead and save this. And we're going to publish our changes. We're going to publish that. Go back here. We're going to go ahead and delete our URL string. And in the console, we're going to see user source information appear when we enter a GCL ID. And you can see we have the user source Google Ads, and we now have a custom value called medium, and the value there is Google. Now, what if we, looking back at our user source rules, we decide that we're going to change this to UTM source Google Discovery. And what we see here is that we still, again, have a user source custom value equals Google. Now notice I have an extra space here in the back of my medium value. So let's go ahead and delete that. Make sure I don't have any on these ones and save that. That should clear that up. But notice what we're doing here is we're taking a number of user sources and we're kind of grouping those together. We're inferring what the medium is based on the more detailed information here that appears automatically in our source. And so this is just one example of how we can use custom values. We could do a number of other things, such as identify test users or save timestamps or push or group certain data layer activity together by identifying a common variable value. And then we can use that to drive a strategy within our measurement. Again, there'll be a learn how to write custom rules button here soon that will have a larger overview of how to write rules. I recommend you go through that video because it'll give you a better understanding of the comprehensive things that you can do writing rules inside of ListenLayer.